the president, Donald Trump.
This election will decide whether we will defend the American way of life or whether we will allow a radical movement to completely dismantle and destroy it.
The challenger, Joe Biden.
It's time for us, for we the people, to come together and make no mistake. United, we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America.
Tonight, the main event, the first presidential debate.
Most presidential election years are tumultuous. Few anything close to this. The president impeached, a global pandemic costing more than 200,000 Americans their lives, millions more their jobs, racial protests, political violence, and now a Supreme Court confirmation battle in the closing weeks of the campaign. But through it all, this presidential race has been remarkably stable. Go back to the polls in January, you'll see that Joe Biden, still fighting for the Democratic nomination, had about a 7-point lead over President Trump. Take a look today, and the polling averages are basically in the same place. Our chief White House correspondent John Carl is in Cleveland. And John, with exactly 5 weeks to go, the president has to do something tonight to shake up this race.
If he doesn't shake up the race, George, the bottom line is he is likely to lose this race. As you mentioned, the polls have been steady nationally. They've also been steady in virtually every single battleground state. The top 12 states, he has failed to have a sustainable lead in any of them over the last several days. And he also knows, off the several months, he also knows, George, that if he doesn't change the dynamic and if he doesn't change the dynamic, the trajectory of the race, he will lose. And he knows that this is his single best chance to do so. This debate, an audience of potentially 100 million people, head-to-head with Joe Biden. We still have 2 debates after this, but people are already voting. If he's going to change the dynamic of the race, he has to start to do it now. He's been here before. You remember 4 years ago, his campaign was written off as dead after the Access Hollywood debate. He came in, after the tape was leaked, he came into the debate, co-moderated by Martha Raddatz, and he went on the attack, ruthlessly and relentlessly on the attack. He turned around his campaign. I suspect he's going to try to do something very much like that tonight.
We will be watching that tonight. A lot of pressure on Joe Biden, obviously, as well. Mary Bruce also in Cleveland tonight. I guess, Mary, the watchwords for the Biden strategy tonight: don't sit on your lead, but don't take Trump's bait.
Exactly, George. The Biden campaign just told us he is ready for anything here tonight, and he may very well have to be. He knows that the president is going to try to make this personal, but he says he's not going to be baited into some kind of brawl. The challenge for Biden here tonight is going to be trying to rise above all of the attacks and the gutter politics to focus on the issues. We know he is eager to talk about the president's taxes and his business record, and in the midst of this pandemic, he's also likely to hammer the issue of health care. And even though Biden has flatly labeled the president a liar, don't expect him here tonight to spend a lot of time fact-checking the president. Instead, we're told he wants to spend all of his time here speaking directly to the American people. Biden, of course, is very familiar with this venue. This will be his 27th debate for the White House, but he has also shown that he at times can be an uneven debater, and we know that the vice president has to perform tonight. He has never been up against an opponent like Donald Trump. He has to prove the president wrong when he attacks him on his mental fitness. George, Joe Biden has to bring it tonight.
And we will be watching to see if he does. Wild card thrown in this debate in the final hours. That Sunday explosive report in the New York Times about the president's taxes got access to the president's tax returns, something he has not released for the last several years. Cecilia Vega has the latest on that.
Yeah, George, the Trump team said today they expect this to be the very first question tonight, and they are ready for it. But you just said it. He has fought this every step of the way. He's not faced questions extensively since this story broke on Sunday. He's expected to get questions on this tonight. He has not released his tax returns, the first president in modern history to do so. So now he will face these big questions. And heading into tonight, this has given the Biden team fresh ammunition. They are going to argue that the president, in that $750 that he paid in income taxes the year he won the White House in his first year in office, was less than teachers and firefighters and nurses in this country have paid. The Trump team, they're expected to say that this is smart business, that in fact Joe Biden is the one who helped create the tax code in this country. George, the big question heading in tonight on this issue of taxes is, will voters care about this? The Trump team is hoping that this was litigated already back in 2016.
World News Tonight anchor David Muir is here. One thing we know the voters care about, COVID-19, the pandemic, going to be a whole topic tonight in the debate.
No question about that, George. And we have to remember that this country is exhausted by the polarization, the politics, and most certainly, as you point out, by the pandemic. More than 200,000 American lives lost, millions without work. And, you know, it was months ago, that first interview with the president in the pandemic. And I asked him, are you comfortable with this election becoming a referendum on your handling of the pandemic? And you could see the pain in his face. He said, you know, I am and I'm not. But he went on to tell me that I deserve credit for my handling of the pandemic. We know that in recent weeks he has said I deserve an A+. But then came the audio tapes, the Bob Woodward audio tapes, when you could hear him saying, I'm downplaying the virus to avoid panic in this country. And Joe Biden responded to that, saying it is close to criminal. And I think the big question tonight is whether or not Joe Biden takes it that far on the stage and what President Trump will say to defend not only his handling, but where do we go from here? What's his vision for the next 4 years and the next 4 months, quite frankly? How and when does he see this country pulling itself out of a pandemic that's taken more than 200,000 lives?
And what will he say about the vaccine? Lindsay Davis also here tonight. We know the president has tried to hit the theme of law and order in recent weeks, playing off the racial protests we've seen across the country this summer.
Sure, and certainly many people still feeling raw in the wake of the lack of charges in Breonna Taylor. I'm going to add to David's word, Americans feeling exhausted. I think that they're also angry and frustrated. I'm mindful of a little boy in a picture who was protesting in Columbia, South Carolina, that was holding a sign, a black boy who said, we didn't come this far to only come this far. And I think that that's a question that's going to loom large on the stage tonight as far as which one of these candidates is going to actually help propel black and brown communities forward. I think that it's plausible that we could see President Trump pull the 1994 crime bill out of his back pocket. I mean, this is
Joe
legislation. Yes, Joe Biden wrote the legislation, and many argue that this was really detrimental to the black community for decades, even now today. However, on the flip side, the Trump administration is not willing to acknowledge that systemic racism still exists in this country. I thought it was really interesting. There was a Pew study that recently came out that only 9% of Trump supporters actually believe it's harder in this country to be black than white. Compare that to 74% of those who support Biden. I think that we do have to be mindful. Only 1/3, or actually 1/3, which is the largest amount that we've had in history, non-white voters in this electorate this year.